Chapter 141 to 143. Both Conan and Rei watched Mei and Ringo in silence, Rei leisurely enjoying their sword fight, in which Mei was grossly outmatched, while Conan observed only Ringo and her movements. She was not interested in the farce of a fight whatsoever. Slowly, Conan's discerning eyes started widening, as she spotted what she previously didn't even bother noticing. Her style changed. Conan pursed her lips in concentration. Indeed, it did change. She frowned. Ringo became slower? No. She stopped dodging. Why would she? Conan narrowed her eyes. Someone who didn't intimately know Ringo's fighting style would not catch up on it, but Conan had trained the redhead. If anyone knew how Ringo fought, it would be her. She no longer dodges everything. She fights as if she was heavily armored, and most of her opponent's attacks didn't even matter. Rei smirked as he saw the focused look on Conan's face with the corner of his eye. He quickly understood that Conan noticed. Ringo's style simply became more reckless. Blows that she would previously in no way let even graze her, the weakest but dangerous ones, now ever so slightly scraped her. She still tried to evade, but the new technique of Ringo is a game changer for her, and I made sure the girl understood it. Rei thought while merrily shaking his head. I really look forward to when she is finally comfortable testing it in a real fight. Just then groggy Yujiro walked out of the house, rubbing her eyes and stretching like a cat. Good morning, she mumbled, just loud enough to be heard. Oh, Yugi-chan, finally awake? Rei teased while gesturing towards the spot next to him, causing the girl to happily nod and sit where he told her to. As if you didn't know I woke up, Yujiro cheekily puffed out her cheeks. The month she spent with Rei and his girls really improved her overly serious nature, and she became more playful, truer to her feelings. She was no longer wary whenever Rei was around. A second later, Rei's clone stepped outside with a tray of scrambled eggs, toasts, and 2 fishes for the resident cat. Naturally, it started to prepare breakfast the second she woke up, since Rei had the entire place covered in various seals, among which various detection seals were quite common. Yujiro's expression brightened like the sun when she saw the tray with breakfast, and especially the fishes. Rei proudly chuckled when he heard her audibly gulp her saliva down. The girl was getting quite used to his cooking. Without even waiting, Yujiro started chomping on the fish first. Yes, eat up, kitty. Mei wanted to start your training today. You will need all the energy you could muster. Heisha woodli grine. He knew what Mei prepared, and honestly, Nibi Jinchuriki or not, he was pitying the girl. Maybe I should teach Mei some common sense when it comes to instructing others? Nah, practice is better than 1,000 words. Sorry, Yujito, your sacrifice will not be in vain. His lips slightly twitched, which was noticed only by Conan, who hid her silent snickers behind the sleeve of her purplish-black kimono. Yujito started choking on her food, clearly wanting to say something in return, if her narrowed glare was an indication, but Conan spoke first. Well, I think you should stretch before Mei is able to get you in her care. Anyway, Rei, you promised me a sparring match yesterday. Still up for it? She leaned closer towards him and kissed his cheeks with an expectant expression, making Rei's eyebrow twitch. In the end, he sighed and relented. He knew there was no avoiding it. She clearly knows I hate fighting her, because it is so hard to hit her. Why the heck did she have to come to enjoy sparring against me? It is pure torture chasing her all over the field. Damned 7 swordsmen of the mist. I clearly remember she got this bad habit of enjoying making her opponents irritated when she started sparring against them with her clones, while she hid in the treetops, snacking on sweets as they made fools of themselves. Rei stood up, resigned to his fate, and followed, excitedly skipping Conan to the nearby empty training field, while leaving Yujito to her much-needed breakfast. Unfortunately for him, there was no member of the 7 swordsmen present, so it was him who had to suffer. Needless to say, his desire for Ringo's new jutsu to be showcased in Tsunade's power-up was not entirely without any ulterior motives. He desperately needed a new playmate for Conan. Maybe I should fetch Kisame later on? This is pure bullshit, Yujito subconsciously muttered as she watched the fight between Rei and Conan. Yes, fight. It was not a sparring match. Not when both threw around assuredly lethal moves. What kind of madman did I agree to join? She dryly laughed. Most of the time, the only thing Yujito could see was blue lightning flashes and a flurry of paper slices. She couldn't even hear the sound of fighting, as the sound of static deafened her, and more often than not, she had to cover her eyes from the ferocious winds generated from the exchange. She got only glimpses of severed limbs and, well, she now really didn't look forward to the training Mei prepared for her, if this was any indication. Isn't that similar to the rakeage speed? Yujito mentally screamed. In the field, Rei, holding his chikudo, zapped from one place to another, cutting Conan's limbs, piercing her heart, decapitating her. Only for the blood to sprout the second he slashed through her flesh. Then a second later, the blood burst into uncountable red paper slices as her body changed to variously colored paper slices. By that time, however, Rei was already exchanging blows with yet another Conan, who who attacked him a split second after he scored a hit on the previous one. Hagoromo, have mercy on my soul. Havinid. He cut off Conan's hand. He turned around and pierced the head of the Conan that appeared behind him right through her eyeball. Never. He kicked the body away, getting his sword free out of her head and fluidly slashing towards the right, slitting the throat of the next Conan. Yends. He kicked behind himself, hitting the knee of the next Conan, unbalancing her while he heaved the sword up and brought it down on her in a downward slash, bisecting her. The entire surrounding was now just a flurry of paper, forcing Rei to saturate his body with lighting chakra and bolt away from there in order to avoid being caught in them. This repeated again and again and again for the next hour. 7,150, 7,151, 7,152, 7,153. Rei counted. How many freaking times do I have to almost kill you until you are satisfied, Conan? It's been an hour already. He stopped, lowering his sword, and Conan appeared in a flurry of paper 4 meters in front of him, totally fine and pristine condition. I take it, you like my newest masterpiece, she said with a very rare full-blown content smile on her face, making Rei scowl. Only you could create such a complicated yet perverted thing from a foundation made on most basic jutsu. It's damn annoying, Rei huffed, glaring at the woman who giggled, making him involuntarily smile. Why is it only during these moments when I am completely irritated that she forgets her facade? Not cute at all. Rei hummed, also slightly smiling without even realizing it. So, did you see through my newest origami technique? Conan proudly asked. Are you really going to call it origami technique? Rei asked in disbelief, but Conan just playfully shrugged. That is a very big part of it, after all. She innocently blinked at Rei's fed-up yet piercing and accusing stare. In the end, Rei had to admit his defeat and sighed. Fine. Whatever. He grumbled. So, my technique? Conan tilted her head with a small coy smile, causing Rei to stop his grumbling and snort in derision. What technique? He asked with thick sarcasm covering his tone. All you do is kawarimi right before you are hit with a singular slip of paper, while activating the storage seal on that paper, which pops in a paper clone mid-kawarimi. There is that henge sustained by the clone itself that makes it seem as if my attack really hit you and blood actually spurted out before the clone dissolves back into paper slices a second later. All you do is use clone technique, kawarimi, and henge. Rei wanted to scream. So why the fuck is it so hard to freaking hit you? What is this bullshit? You didn't even try to dodge. You didn't take even one step during the entire fight. Kawarimi, kawarimi, kawarimi. The fuck is that shit? He raged. Conan just heartily laughed at his outburst with a teasing look. Cool, isn't it? Cool my ass. Rei whispered under his nose. He was moving at solid Raikage level speed when the guy was using his lighting armor, and yet, despite his senses being enhanced, even he couldn't spot the moment when she substituted herself with the paper. To think her origami would reach such a level. She is a monster, no doubt. At this rate, there is no way to win against her without a large, massively destructive area of effect jutsu. The way she used henge to actually simulate blood and gore, while she transfers herself to her opponent's blind spot, and attacks while he is distracted due to scoring the hit. That's outright nasty. I can see how most shinobi could fall for that. Everyone stops for a millisecond. If their enemy doesn't dodge an obvious attack, they are certainly capable of evading. Whether they want or not, their brain starts to think about whys, and that momentary pause is when she strikes from behind. It would take some serious battle and danger instincts, or high sensory ability to react to that. Rei's eyes gleamed with happiness despite his sullen appearance. He was naturally glad Conan was getting even stronger. Rei sighed to calm himself down and decided to indulge Conan, who had this praise me shine in her eyes. I must admit, he shook his head in disbelief. The way you fluidly connected the 3 basic aspects of shinobi arts into a singular technique and made it into something like this. There was a reason why the basic 3 jutsu were, well, basic. The henge was an introduction to the lowest level genjutsu. The basic clones were also supposed to be genjutsu aim technique, but their purpose was to make sure the students have at least basic chakra control. And kawarimi was a preparation for ninjutsu. One just stretched his chakra, connecting it with a thing they wanted to swap with and then swapped. This meant it was not teleportation, just chakra manipulation. As Conan demonstrated, she could swap with any of her uncountable paper slips, since they all contained some of her chakra. It was basically a teleportation technique in her hands, since she didn't need to reach with her chakra. The entire thing barely cost her anything, and she could probably do it with her eyes closed for an entire week without a single break. How broken jutsu! Rei inwardly chuckled and walked towards Conan, and with a gentle smile, he lovingly rubbed her head while tenderly hugging her. Good job, honey. Conan and Rei finished with their sparring match, and alongside still flabbergasted Yujito, they went towards the training ground, where Mei prepared something special for her kiddie charge. The second Yujito showed her face. Excited Mei dragged her towards the middle of an obstacle course if it still could be called that. Ray could somewhat see parts of the obstacle course used to train ANBU, ramped up to insanity levels. Lethal traps, maiming traps, and worse yet. So this is why May wanted those area-effective chakra-constricting seals, gravity-heightening seals, and water-like environment simulating seals. Ray thought with a sweat drop as his throat went dry. And they say my training methods are brutal. Conan mentally deadpanned at the clueless May. She couldn't help but feel proud. Does she want to kill me? Yujido did the clever thing and fearfully took a step back. This, May proudly gestured towards the huge death trap she prepared, is my masterpiece. As the Jinchuriki of the Nibi, you are naturally nimble and agile, so training those aspects is a must. She exclaimed with twinkling eyes, making everyone's face twitch. So I asked myself, hey May, how could we help Yugi-chan? And the answer was obvious. Obstacle course. MAS-sensei. Yujido asked unsurely, looking at the obstacle course. And the corpses around? She pointed towards the bodies or parts of bodies, still strewn all over the course. That. May dismissively waved her hand around. Don't worry. I just borrowed them for testing purposes. Ray face-bombed. Conan approvingly snickered. Yujido gulped. Only now that she took a closer look did she notice. They are all B and A-ranked rogue ninjas from the bingo book. All of them are Jonin level. She mentally freaked out, not paying attention to the fidgeting blonde Jinchuriki next to her. May tilted her head in a pondering manner. Though, I am not really sure why they all decided to take a permanent vacation from this realm after starting the obstacle course. The best of them didn't even get halfway through. May shook her head in disappointment. Yar. Permanent vacation? Yujido took another step back. She didn't need a permanent vacation from her living state. Maybe I should have stayed in Kumo. Mai! Raibutatin. Maybe it would be prudent to shroud Yujito in your steam armor to ensure she is not fatally injured. Jinchuriki or not, he didn't see a 12-year-old finishing even 10% of the insane death sentence of an obstacle course May prepared. Not when experienced Jonins apparently died, not getting past 1/4 of it. May looked a bit conflicted at making it easier for Yujito. She clearly had great expectations of the younger blonde, but... May! Conan gave the girl a meaningful but amused look, making her flinch and quickly nod in acceptance. Good girl. Conan smiled at May while inwardly she was facepalming. No matter how you look at it, with all those restrictive seals affecting the entire area of the obstacle course, even Chunins would be reduced to civilians. Just the water-simulating seal would make this almost impossible ordeal, unless one had incredible body strength, but... Ray walked towards the two girls, wrapping his right arm around May's shoulder to cheer her up, while wrapping his left around Yujito's to make her feel better. He felt there were things that just had to be said. After all, this was also training for May on how to train someone. May, you are expecting too much of Yujito. She is barely high Genin to low Chunin level right now. You can't compare her to yourself when you were 12. You were already training for years with us at such an age. Yujito didn't have personal trainers. If you want to help her train, you gotta start slowly and be mindful of her needs. Not. His voice turned awkward. Try to kill her with the first exercise. It took some persuasion, but in the end, May relented to go easier. Much easier on Yujito. Needless to say, the resident kitty holder was elated at hearing her life was spared from having any restricting seals placed on her during the course, and the fact her life was safeguarded by May's jutsu, Ray's seals, and to give her a bit more comfort, even Conan created full-body underwear from her earth chakra-hardened paper slices for the girl. Much to Yujito's dismay, they didn't have the heart to outright cancel it since May put her heart into preparing it. Half-hour later, Yujito stood in front of the entry point of the course, nervous as all hell, while she felt up the invisible steam armor shrouding her. Seeing she needed encouragement, May walked closer to her and gave her a brief hug. Yugi-chan. She firmly addressed her. When she was sure she had Yujito's full attention, her voice softened. I know you had a very hard and sad upbringing. I had too. I remember every rock, punch, or kick thrown at me. The only advice I can give you is to not try to forget, but remember and steel your resolve. Train so it can't happen to you again. Train so nobody can treat you like trash again. I can give you training. I can teach you. But it is you who needs to repeatedly break your limits. It will be painful and at times you will cry in hopelessness, but trust me, it is worth it. May said with a gentle, encouraging smile. A bit flimsy speech at cheering her up, but it would do. Ray chuckled, shaking his head. How cringy. Conan, who sat in Ray's lap, slightly smiled and leaned her back into his chest. Then again, that might be exactly how she felt training under me and Ray. They watched as Yujito gained a determined look and turned towards the obstacle course. And then it started. Yujito ran inside, masterfully running through the first corridor, which was riddled to the brim with projectile trap seals that spewed kunais when somebody was near them. She almost made it look easy. She is actually using surface walking to run on the wall, where the amount of trap seals is the lowest. At least we can be sure she can use her brain well. Conan pointedly commented, causing May to be a bit depressed when she remembered the numerous hours of Conan telling her she was doing cool-looking but moronic things. Yujito reached the second obstacle. Vertically laid poles in a sea of swirling fog that kept close to the ground. The half-melted, slowly sizzling bodies in the fog gave Yujito a clear image of what would happen should she fall. With a gulp, she used all the nimbleness and dexterity of a cat she could muster in order to jump from pole to pole, trying to get through the obstacle as fast as possible. She stepped on the third pole and discovered the room was not as simple as it first appeared. Ah, gravity-enhancing seals with an area of effect around the pole, isn't it? Conan asked, observing the panicky blonde as she almost fell into the melting fog. Yup, some poles have none, others have seals with different gravity scaling. This entire exercise is built to make her control her balance at will and become accustomed to gravity or pressure shifts in the environment. May said, proud of herself to come up with it. Look, she managed to land on the fourth pole. Ray said, changing the topic. He was not about to discuss how asinine this entire exercise was. One misstep and you are in a melting mist. Yujito had to step on very small poles of various sizes. The smallest could fit only one tiptoe, while the largest barely had place for 1.5 of her small foot. Needless to say, the ones on the smaller side were more common. She also needed to be capable of adjusting her gravity center, in a split second, to adjust to sudden gravity pressure change due to the seals. The only thing that was missing would be something to force Yujito to go quickly instead of her own pace. Now that would make the creator into one right asshole. Yujito was doing well. She noticed she had time to adjust, so she jumped from pole to pole, taking at least 5 minutes to get used to the sudden gravity shift on each pole. Even those that didn't have gravity seals were quite challenging, since she was expecting the gravity shift, and when it didn't come, she got unbalanced. Many times did Ray think she would finally fall as she flailed her hands, only her natural cat-like balance saving her. Conan could see May getting excited as Yujito was about to jump from the 10th pole to the 11th. She only managed 1-0 before. Ray deadpanned, seeing the pole under Yujito fall down a second after she landed on it, causing her to fall into the melting fog. Only the steam armor around her prevented the girl from being made into a mushy goo by the fog. Ray slowly turned his gaze towards May and gave her a dry look. Really? Now he understood why so many Jonins died, without even completing 1/4 of the course. It was the work of a completely sadistic bastard. The whole thing was made to be impossible to pass. Yup, it wouldn't be an obstacle course without proper traps to give her a bit of a push. May brightly smiled before frowning. But to think she would fail at the second obstacle out of 20. You were right, Ray. Yugi-chan needs a more refined approach. I am not going to ask what exactly refined means. Clearly, May got her inspiration and training ideas from somewhere. He glanced at amused Conan. Sorry, Yujito. It's for your own benefit. This concerned observer is unable to ease your suffering. Ringo stood in between a small man in green spandex with thick eyebrows and Konoha headband, who was on his ass, and the group of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Well, I heard the Mizukage sent his 7 best to cause some mayhem in the land of fire, but to think you would be bullying. Ringo glanced at Due and shuddered. Whatever that green creep is. Muri, Raiga Kurisuki sneered. Shouldn't you be hiding in some hole? Going rogue, bringing such a shame to the title of Kiba wielder. I will enjoy making a funeral for you, he said, reminding others who was the woman in front of them. Funnily enough, half of them were new wielders. Capable but nothing like the ones in May's generation. Sparkling shit stain. You can't even handle your own little sword. Making this into a pissing contest? Seriously? Acting cool doesn't suit you. Ringo rolled her eyes, ignoring his enraged spluttering, and drew the chakra blades she received from Ray years ago, attracting the attention of the swordsmen. They naturally knew a quality blade when they saw one. Ringo decided to indulge them. These two have no names. Ray told me it is the swordsman who should be known, not the swords. While I might not wholly agree, I can see his reasoning. You all are nothing. You have no reputation by yourselves. You are known for the reputation of the weapons you wield. The reputation that was given to them by the feats of their past wielders. She slowly trailed her gaze on each of the 7 in front of her. But you are not them. As someone who grew up on stories about the heroics of the 7 swordsmen of the mist, Ringo was really disappointed by the current generation. They might not be weak and each of them is at the very least experienced A-rank ninja, but the war was very costly for Kirigakure, especially the failed attack on the Land of Fire. Not to mention the viciousness of A after his fiancée died. Kirigakure ninjas were forced to invade the Land of Lightning because of the decision of the council, but A was putting his everything to slaughter as many of them as humanly possible. Considering his lightning armor, he was doing pretty well for himself. Haruto Kurenari, the previous holder of Samahata from Ringo's generation, died in the Land of Lightning. His squad was intercepted during one of their missions by Kiri Hunting Squad, led by A himself. The man knew he could not win against A and his hunting squads. Even if he disregarded the blatant disadvantage of being outnumbered 1-5, his squad members were not trained ANBU like the Kiri ninjas. Haruto also knew he could not run either since A was much faster than him. So, Haruto chose the logical option. He gave Samahata to his squad and told them to run while he, holding an ordinary katana, stood his ground against A and all his hunting squads. The man actually managed to hold them all long enough for the Kiri ninjas to run away with Samahata. Without his sacrifice, Kiri would have lost one of its 7 blades that day. Compared to that, Ringo Riley looked at Fuguki Suikazan, the newest wielder of Samahata. She could see the man was compatible with the sword. If he were not, Samahata would not choose him. But compatibility only meant he had high enough chakra reserves, and his chakra was tasty enough for Samahata. Without the sword, the guy was a bit lacking, to be honest. Ringo knew of him, and even now she asked Konan for intel about the wielders of the 7 swords. Frankly, Fuguki depended too much on Samahata's abilities in her opinion, which made her respect for the guy drop. Samahata was overpowered. Even a total beginner Genin-level swordsman could defeat a Chunin-level opponent with the sword by just waving it recklessly. Hence, Ringo didn't feel the need to respect Fuguki himself, rather than the blade he was wielding. Her eyes trailed towards the wielder of Kubikurabocho Juzo Biwa, and she smiled. The man was a total asshole, but Ringo couldn't say he was not skilled. Mari, your successor just might live up to your expectations. Ringo mentally noted with a small amount of relief. The previous owner of the Kubikurabocho, Mari, was the only other woman in the group in Ringo's generation. She was vicious and fought for every single bit of infamy. In the Third War, she, despite being only an A-rank ninja, killed at least 1 Konoha S-rank ninja, Uchiha no less, and 12 A-rank ones. Not to mention over 50 B-rank victims of her silent killing. Out of all of the members of the 7, it was Mari who dealt the biggest damage to the enemy forces. The woman was one hell of a battlefield assassin. Honestly, Ringo would even go as far as saying the woman created the silent killing method. Sure, the previous owners did use Kirigakure no Jutsu in tandem with the sword, but it was Mari who improved it to such a degree that it actually became an art of killing. Mari always said that there is just something magical about assassinating people with a big-ass cleaver. Ringo inwardly chuckled, full of mirth. Unfortunately, Mari died in the failed attempt to invade the Land of Fire. Kubikurabocho was one of the unimpressive swords. Its ability was not overpowered. Drinking blood to repair itself? Bah. But that only meant the wielders of the blade had to be that much better skill-wise. And hungry for fame. Ringo grinned at the obvious desire to prove himself in Juzo's eyes. Kubikurabocho was weak compared to the abilities of other swords. Hence, its wielders always aimed to make it more and more known. Make it taste more and more blood. With Juzo, Ringo was satisfied. Yup, that guy is so not getting killed today. Then her gaze fell onto the last member of the current generation of the 7, who was worth her attention. To her eternal irritation, it was the wielder of Kiba blades, Raiga Kurasuki, or as she dubbed him, the Shitstain. How I would love to kill him, Ringo seethed. But Rei wants him to live. It took quite a bit of persuasion for Rei to make Ringo promise him she would not kill Raiga. After all, Rei was not omnipresent, much less omnipotent. If the guy survived, there was a chance he would end up meeting the kid with strange dojutsu again, and Rei was mildly interested in the kid. As for Raiga, Rei didn't care about the guy. He was only a convenient tool to find the crippled kid with dojutsu, whatever he was called. Well, the surroundings are slippery, and my hand could always slip and cripple the bastard. Ringo offhandedly hummed. The last 4. Jinin Akabino, the wielder of Kabudawari, Jinpachi Munashi, the wielder of Shibuki, Kushimaru Kuriere, the wielder of Nuabari, and Arata Haruna, the wielder of Hiramakarei. Now these 4, Ringo was killing for sure. They were all from her own generation, therefore dangerous and highly experienced in using their respective blades. Oh yes, I will enjoy testing my new jutsu on you. Ringo whispered to herself as she looked at the 4 of them with a battle-hungry look, while raising her right arm and blade towards the sky. At that moment, all 4 of them had similar thoughts. Damn, do we have to encounter this kind of crazy? The cloudy heavens rained lightning.